Welcome back. In the last episode, we talked about impulse. Today, we are talking about fear, specifically the fear of change. We tend to think that if a system is broken, we will naturally fix it. But behavioral economics teaches us about the status quo bias. We prefer a familiar hell to an unfamiliar heaven. We are fighting a civil war inside our heads, and usually the wrong side wins. Let's look at that internal battle first.
The Two Wolves. What the Cherokee story didn't tell you.
The fire crackles between grandfather and grandson as shadows dance across weathered faces.
There's a battle inside you,
the old Cherokee says, his voice carrying the weight of generations.
Two wolves, always fighting.
The boy leans closer.
One wolf is dark. It feeds on anger, envy, regret, greed. The other is light. It feeds on joy, peace, love, compassion. Every choice you make feeds one or the other. Every thought, every action.
The grandson shifts uncomfortably.
But grandfather, which wolf wins?
The old man's eyes reflect the firelight.
The one you feed.
Now, most people hear this ancient wisdom and think, right, just feed the good wolf. Got it. Problem solved. They walk away feeling enlightened. Maybe even make a few good choices for a week or two. That's precisely the kind of surface-level thinking that keeps you trapped in the same patterns forever. But here is what the Cherokee grandfather didn't mention. Well, he wasn't a neuropsychologist, how could he know? You've been systematically trained to feed the wrong wolf. We think we're making conscious choices, but we're actually running on autopilot systems programmed by the forces that don't give a crap about our future. Your rational self knows which wolf you want to feed, but your impulse self has been conditioned to automatically feed the other one. So the real question isn't about which wolf wins, but how do you reprogram the feeding system that's been operating in the background of your mind? How do you become conscious of non-conscious choices? The story got the wolves right. He just forgot to mention that someone else has been controlling the feeding schedule all along. So, we are being programmed to feed the dark wolf. But if we know our environment is rigged against us, and if we know our willpower is weak, how do we win? We have to take a page out of Greek mythology. We have to realize that our future self needs to physically restrain our present self from doing something stupid. This is called pre-commitment.
How ancient Greeks solved self-control before self-help existed.
Odysseus faced the sirens, creatures whose songs were so irresistible they drove every sailor who heard them to shipwreck or death. But Odysseus had understood something crucial about human psychology that we're still trying to figure out. He knew his impulsive self couldn't be trusted. So he didn't try to rely on willpower or positive thinking or any other of the crap we tell ourselves will work out when temptation hits. Instead, he commanded his crew to lash him to the mast, made them plug their ears with wax so they couldn't hear the songs, and gave them explicit, non-negotiable instructions. No matter how much I beg, scream, or threaten you, do not untie me. This is pre-commitment. This is the rational self making decisions for the impulsive self before the impulsive self hijacks the controls. When the siren sang, obviously, Odysseus felt the overwhelming urge to follow. But his earlier rational self had already made the choices. The decision was locked in when his thinking was clear, not when his dopamine was firing like a machine gun. He didn't try to outsmart his impulses in the moment, he outsmarted them in advance. This isn't about ancient mythology, but the two-self conflict that's happening in your brain right now. You have a rational self that makes great plans and an impulsive self that sabotages them the moment things get difficult. The mistake we make is thinking these two selves can negotiate in real time. They can't. When your impulsive self is in control, it will rationalize any decision that gives immediate relief. Oh, just this one time. I deserve this. I'll start again tomorrow, I promise. You see, the enemy isn't external temptation. It's the part of you that thinks it knows better when the pressure is on. The part that believes it can handle situations, your rational self knows it can't. Odysseus survived because he didn't trust himself. He knew the song was too sweet to resist. But what happens when an entire civilization refuses to tie themselves to the mast? What happens when a culture decides that maintaining their tradition or their status quo is more important than their actual survival? You get an ecological collapse that is almost hard to believe.
How cultural pride destroyed a civilization.
You are living on a tiny island in the middle of the Pacific, and your entire civilization depends on palm forests. Trees literally equal survival. Canoes for fishing, tools for building, shelter from storms. Simple equation, right? The people of Easter Island had a different approach to math. They chose cultural purity over actual survival. Polynesian settlers hit Easter Island in the 13th century and found paradise. Thick palm forests, fertile soil, abundant resources. Life was good. They built an entire culture around these trees, developed traditions, and created a whole new way of life. Then resources started running thin. Trees weren't growing back as fast as they were being cut. The smart move, well, hit the brakes, scale back, maybe find some alternatives. But no. Instead of reducing tree use to preserve the forest, they doubled down, cut more trees, maintained all their traditions, because admitting their way of life was killing their future felt like cultural suicide. So they chose actual suicide instead, just more ceremonial and drawn out. The logic was flawless. We can't change who we are. This is how we've always done things. Our ancestors would roll over in their graves if we abandoned our traditions now. By the 17th century, they'd succeeded brilliantly. The island was perfectly deforested. The soil had eroded into the ocean. Famine became the new national pastime. The population crashed from thousands to hundreds. But hey, at least they died with their cultural identity intact. This isn't about some ancient civilization being dumb. This is about how our brains are wired to choose familiar destruction over unfamiliar survival. The Easter Islanders could see the forest disappearing, but changing their entire way of life felt more terrifying than gradual extinction. It's the same mind trick that keeps people in toxic jobs, failing relationships, or dying businesses. We'll torch our future to avoid admitting our present is broken. Change feels like death, so we choose actual death instead. Change feels like death, so we choose actual death instead. That is the essence of loss aversion. We fight harder to keep what we have than to gain what we need. And sometimes that fear makes us reject the very thing that could save us. You might think you'd never be that irrational, but history shows that when faced with a familiar danger versus an unfamiliar cure, we almost always choose the danger.
When familiar death beats unfamiliar life.
In the early 800s, Edward Jenner handed humanity a true miracle, the smallpox vaccine. A simple injection of cowpox that could prevent the far deadlier smallpox. Millions of lives could be saved. Problem solved, right? Well, here is where human psychology decided to take a hard left into stupidity. Communities across England, especially in rural areas, looked at this revolutionary vaccine and said, nah thanks, we stick with what we know. What they knew was variolation. The brilliant procedure involved deliberately infecting people with actual smallpox, then crossing your fingers and hoping they'd survive to gain immunity. The success rate, well, about 97 to 98%, which sounds great until you realize that means 2 to 3% of people died from the cure itself. You see, while variolation was familiar, the vaccine was uncertain, new, untested in their minds. So they chose the method that was literally more likely to kill them because it felt safer. Think about that for a second. They had two options: inject some harmless cowpox or deliberately catch a disease that was ravaging entire populations. And they chose the latter because it was traditional. The familiar danger, smallpox variolation, seemed less threatening than the unfamiliar solution. Even though the math was crystal clear, even though Jenner had proved the vaccine worked, even though people were dying from the safe method. This wasn't ignorance. People were trapped by the same cognitive cage that keeps us all choosing known devils over unknown angels. Our brains are wired to treat unfamiliar solutions as bigger threats than familiar problems. It's not logic. It's survival instinct gone haywire. This is the same mental trap that keeps people in toxic relationships, dead-end jobs, or failing businesses. The known suffering feels manageable. The unknown opportunity feels terrifying. It took government mandates in the 1840s to finally force people to accept the thing that could save them. Decades of unnecessary death, because humans would rather choose familiar danger than unfamiliar safety. That's the cognitive cage. We reject the new vaccine, the new job, or the new strategy because the unknown feels terrifying. We stick with the familiar devil. The takeaway for today: identify where you are choosing comfort over survival. Which wolf are you feeding? Next time, we reach the conclusion of our course: the logic of ruin. Why we throw good money after bad. See you there.